if you buy these players in Dynasty Fantasy Football, you're looking at a pretty big market value win in the future if they do pan out. One of the guys we're talking about here is Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously drafted in the 3rd round, drafted to come in and produce. Really, I think a lot of people thought he was going to produce more in his freshman year in the NFL than he actually did. When you're looking at his snap share in his first year, really didn't get above 30%. He did once, it was 33%, but I mean, he did have a couple double-digit games. Weeks 9, week 10, he did have 12 and 10 points respectively. Outside of that, you're looking at 1 to 2 points per game, anywhere from 2 to 4 carries per game. Outside of the 2 games, he got 8 and 10 carries. Only had a couple targets this year, and honestly, I think he was the running back 69 on the year.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, so it's nice, but at the same time, I think again, a lot of people were looking at Trey Benson, maybe thinking he's going to come in and maybe not do anything this year, but take the job from James Conner next year. Now, what has happened is James Conner during the season actually signed a 2-year extension. This is a 2-year, $19 million deal for James Conner. James Conner, obviously coming off of a pretty good season in his own right, ended up being a pretty good asset for your fantasy teams this last year. He was the running back 11, his first running back one finish since 2021, and now he's under contract for 2 more years. And so you look at somebody like Trey Benson, who again has 3rd round draft capital, and you wonder, okay, how is this guy even going to see the field at this point? When is he actually going to come out and produce? And you look in the last year, Trey Benson, his value was as high as the running back 16, running back 15, all the way until September, really 10th. And then you see a pretty significant drop. He cratered out at running back 34 in October, went back up for a little bit. He's settled to running back about 31 range right now. And so when you're looking at the value adjacent guys to Trey Benson, Isaiah Pacheco, James Conner, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, Najee Harris, J.K. Dobbins. Now here's really the kicker. When you're looking closely at James Conner's deal, the one thing that you'll notice is he is, obviously under contract for this next year, but in his new contract, there is a potential out in 2026 after this 2025 season. The cap hit at that point, I think the dead cap's what, $2.25 million. So, I would think, if James Conner comes out this year and one of a couple things happens, either A, James Conner actually regresses. James Conner has been pretty much getting better at the tail end. He's been better every single year he's played. Yeah. And you've seen him from a fantasy perspective. So it's been kind of a unique situation for a veteran. But do keep in mind, he is going to be 30. Either A, he's going to come out and, if he gets injured, or if he comes out and it's a disappointing season, or if the Cardinals go into full rebuild mode. Who knows what their future is with Kyler Murray at this point. I think that's up for debate. I personally think they're going to roll with him. He's obviously under contract, but the Cardinals at some point are going to have to win games with their franchise quarterback. And so all of that is probably going to come into question after 2025, depending on what, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride and company does with that team. I think there's a very real possibility they take the out on James Conner. And at the point where they do, I don't think the Cardinals will feel the need to go draft a running back this year or next. And I do think Trey Benson was drafted to be given the role that we thought he was going to after James Conner retires, or after James Conner is not on the team anymore. Most people are thinking, okay, that's 2 years out now because James Conner just got an extension. It actually could be 1 year. And again, it's possible they retain him for 2026, and James Conner continues to take away, and Trey Benson becomes the next Kendre Miller. But Trey Benson is we know as a prospect, plenty athletic. He is able to take a lot of carries and handle it well. And if James Conner, again, isn't that guy there, I'm going to bet that it's still Trey Benson. Right now, again, from a price standpoint, you're getting him really in the 11th, 12th round. And for me, a running back there, it's going around guys like Isaiah Pacheco, Tank Bigsby, Xavier Legette, a second-round pick in 27, Justin Fields. I mean, I pretty much flip all those guys for Trey Benson, stash them on my roster, and see what happens to James Conner next year. Because if and when Trey Benson becomes the starting running back on that team, he's obviously going to see a huge value jump. You get a huge value win for your team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Benson. He's a guy that once we looked into the details of James Conner's contract, it definitely made us more comfortable. It's still investing in Trey Benson. We're still expecting the value spike, just going to take a little longer than we initially wanted, and that's okay. It is what it is. I don't think anyone saw the Conner extension coming. No. But one guy that we have not been a huge fan of historically, but are big fans of right now because of his current price is DK Metcalf. I think a lot of the reason that DK has lost so much value is because of JSN really coming out and coming into his own in that offense as really looking like the top option, which go figure, that's what they drafted him to be. And then about halfway through the season last year, he just starts going nuts. And he really is looking to be a lot more dynamic than some people initially expected. And I think that's being a threat down the field. I think that's being a nice yak guy. I think that's a guy that can run in the slot. He can run on the outside. He can really do anything. And DK, as a result, has kind of just, or at least schematically, has kind of just been left to do exactly what he's been doing for a very long time. And that's be 1,000-yard, 7 touchdown DK Metcalf,
Give or
roughly.
take, yep.
And I know we get a lot of shade and a lot of crap for saying that, but if you know, if you look at his production over the last 6 years, it's been about 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns roughly every single year. So the interesting thing with DK, and I didn't even look at his contract going into this video, but he does have a potential out this year. They could cut him if they wanted to. Now, the dead cap would be $21 million. He was guaranteed with that 3-year contract that he signed a few years ago, like $31 million, which I think they've paid. They've paid it all. So really this year, they do have the ability to cut him if they want to. I don't necessarily see that being the case. I think they just let this year ride out, pay him what he's due. They really would only save $10 million, only $10 million, right, if they decided to cut him. And I think they would be worse off as an offense if they decided to move on from him, because there's not really anyone in this class that's going to be able to replace DK from a talent perspective. Unless they took a shot on one of the high end guys in the first round, but they're not going to be doing that most likely. So with DK at 27 years old, for a guy that you know exactly what you're going to get. Again, I keep joking about what his production is on an annual basis, but let's talk about it non-sarcastically. He is incredibly consistent when you're talking about season to season production. When you look at his week to week production, it is all over the place. He had a really good start to the season, and then you did see a direct hit when JSN started producing. DK took a step back. That offense overall was a little bit shaky towards the end of the season. They looked a lot better to start the season compared to what they looked like at the end. Geno obviously is kind of the quarterback situation in Seattle is a little bit in limbo as well. We don't really know what Geno is going to be doing long term, if he's going to stick with Seattle, if they're going to go and try and get a guy in free agency. Matt Stafford is out there. Kirk Cousins is out there. Are those guys better options than Geno at this point? I don't really know. I mean, I think Stafford would be, but Rodgers is around as well. You got a couple old guys that they could go out and invest in potentially or trade for. So there's just a lot of unknowns in Seattle's offense outside of the guaranteed, like JSN being the top option and Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet kind of splitting the backfield like they have been for the last couple of years. So with DK specifically, I'm looking at that situation. I'm looking at the contract. I'm looking at what's going on in Seattle long term, and I'm like, hey, for the past 6 years, he's put up about 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, give or take. And at his respective price at the moment, lower than it's ever been, because again, it's less about the player, more about the price. Terry McLaurin has 3 years on DK Metcalf. I'd rather have DK with 3 years less. And yeah, Terry McLaurin had a way better season this year. But when you're talking about dynasty fantasy football and who's going to hold their value longer, I think I prefer DK there. When you're looking at Derrick Henry, George Pickens, and Brandon Ayuk, I'd rather have DK. Those are guys that are value equivalent to him right now. Jalen Waddle is actually only a year younger than DK Metcalf, and he's a wide receiver 2 in an offense that is just as questionable right now, honestly, long term. And I think this is a price where we just saw DK in our startup go in the 7th round. 7th round DK, you can give me all day, because 7th round DK means wide receiver 3 DK on in your starting lineup.
That's exactly
that
right.
means flex option DK in your starting lineup.
Yes.
That's way, way better than wide receiver 2 DK that you're counting on producing on a weekly basis, who's going to let you down probably half the time.
Yeah.
I'll take the high upside opportunity with DK at his current price, way better than where he was going 4th, 5th round a couple years ago.
I think you nailed it. If he's, I mean, again, it was the season he finished, 10th in points per game, a top 12 wide receiver.
Yeah.
It took literally 2 years for his value and his price to go back down where it should be.
Yeah.
And that was when we were screaming to the rooftops, hey, this is not your wide receiver 1 on your team.
Right.
If this is better served as a wide receiver 2, probably a wide receiver 3. Well, now we're at the price. It's like, okay, I actually like this. So depending on what your team is, again, DK might be somebody that, if you're a contend reload or contend rebuild, we might even tell you to go get DK and let him die on your roster. If you have the value at your positional grades that, we think you do, DK might be a guy we tell you to go get, and we just say, hey, you can plug him into your flex spot for the next couple of years. He's a high upside guy. We can give you buys specific to your team based on your positional grades, based on your 3-year outlook and your team archetype. We can give you the guys you should be targeting specifically and what trades you should be making for them. flockfantasy.com/domain. Annual Motherflocker tier is going to get you a free team blueprint, so it's going to get you all of that information, all done by Nathan and I ourselves. But not only that, you get infinite blueprint with it, which you get the original team review, which, it happens, you go make the trades, and then your team's completely different. Well, the good news is you're going to get an update on that blueprint every single month with infinite blueprint when you sign up for the Annual Motherflocker tier. You also get the rookie draft guide, trade calculator, dynasty rankings. You get the Discord with the brand new trades channel, which has been popping. It's a great place to run your trades by people. So, like I said, flockfantasy.com/domain. Code domain Annual Motherflocker tier. We would love to have you join us over there. We have a great community. Another guy that, again, like we've been recommending people, occasionally go trade for on their team blueprints is a guy we recently talked about, and we want to kind of talk about again, is Chuba Hubbard. Not a guy I was super high on coming into the season. Admittedly, not a guy I was like, oh, I'm super jazzed about Chuba Hubbard, because obviously we were really big Jonathan Brooks fans, rip, and, we expected him to come in and probably produce. No, that was bad take. We were wrong. And Chuba, on the other hand, now even if I knew before the season, hey, Jonathan Brooks is gonna, come out, he's not gonna do anything, he's gonna re-tear his ACL, I probably would have been like, oh man, I'm like, okay, so they're stuck with Chuba and they're gonna have to draft another running back. Well, what ended up happening, as you know, is that Chuba Hubbard ended up getting extended because he had his best season of his career. I mean, keep in mind, Chuba Hubbard at Oklahoma State was a fantastic college running back, right? I mean, statistically, he was incredible. Now, that doesn't mean you're always going to translate to the NFL, and he hadn't had more than, 900 yards coming into this year. He had 1,200 this year. Most efficient he's ever been, or actually just under that, 4.8 yards per carry. He had 43 receptions. You've seen the last 2 years his receptions tick up a little bit, but he had 11 total touchdowns, which is more than double what he had in his best season before. 16.1 points per game. This dude not only was a running back one from a total points standpoint, but from a points per game perspective, I mean, the dude was pretty efficient. When you're looking at some of his, metrics, again, we talked about this in the other video, the opportunity is top 5 in the league, really from an opportunity share, weighted opportunity standpoint. Also 9th in routes run as well. I mean, you're looking at the guy, and he's also, 12th in true yards per carry. He's 33rd in yards per touch, and we touched on this again before. He's a little bit inefficient. But at this point, like Chuba Hubbard, when I'm looking at how I love to build dynasty teams, and again, we break this down a lot with our blueprints, and I love it when I get a blueprint and it's like, this guy has a ton of value in quarterback, a ton of value in wide receiver. And then when you go to his running back room, he doesn't really have a running back in the top 4 rounds, but he's got Chuba Hubbard as his running back too, because Chuba Hubbard's going in the 6th, 7th round right now, probably the 7th, 8th round, honestly. For your team build, if you're really going to build the championship level dynasty team, Chuba Hubbard is a great running back 2 or flex option for your championship dynasty team. He just is. You saw Chuba Hubbard on a lot of championship teams last year. You saw Chuba Hubbard as a trade target for contending teams in the middle of last year. And it worked out truthfully, because now you have Chuba Hubbard on your roster. You invested in him mid-season, and his future outlook is fantastic. Again, the dude's under contract now. He's got as much value insulation as almost any running back in the NFL. He signed a 4-year, $33 million deal. Now, here's the kicker, which I don't think this is going to matter, but he does have potential out in 2026. I doubt they take it. The dead cap would be what, 9.9 million? I doubt that. No, it would be 4.5 million. I doubt they would take this, but there is an out built into that deal after 1 year that could make you skeptical.
What's his cap hit in 2026 compared to the dead cap if they cut him?
It's $6 million in
$6 million to 4, so they'd save $2 million.
So I don't think they're going to do it.
They would probably just keep him at that point.
And again, there's not another out after that until 2020. There's not another out, and he's under contract until 2029. And if I had to guess, if Chuba Hubbard comes out next year and he does anything close to what he did this last year, I would guess Chuba Hubbard is probably going to retain his spot on that roster. Now, again, price-wise, he's the running back 20. Again, this is a guy who's a running back 1 from a production standpoint that you get at low running back 2 prices. That is how you win a dynasty league. Like, plain and simple, that's how you win. That it just is. It's not like, again, he's 25.7 years old. It's not like he's, in the twilight of his career. He also doesn't have a ton of mileage on him from an NFL standpoint, even though he did from a college standpoint. So you have to keep that in mind. But he's really kind of plateaued out right at the running back 15 before the rookies. And then with the rookies, you expect him to go down to the running back 20 range, right? Yeah. And so value adjacent to guys like Derrick Henry, guys like Chris McCaffrey, which if you want to go with the upside and let those guys out on your roster, I'm totally good with it. But Montgomery, Tyrone Tracy is not far behind him. Other positions, really, because I like a lot of these running backs for these contending teams. But you've got T.J. Hawkinson, Jaden Reed on here. Just a lot of guys that when you're looking at, their replacement level at their respective positions, I think Chuba Hubbard, again, is a guy that's going to give you that championship production. And, again, at a really cheap price. Yep. Going like 7th, 8th round. I don't think he's a screaming buy. The other side of this is that, they could get out on him. And, he's not the safest asset. But no, I'm fine investing in running backs in this range.
There are assets that are just as unsafe as Chuba long-term that are going 2 rounds ahead of him. And I think that's the kicker.
Exactly right. So. I don't know. Like, I'm just being 100% honest with you. I don't know why we're so much more comfortable with James Cook as we are Chuba Hubbard.
Facts.
Why? What makes you more comfortable?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So I like Chuba's buy right now.
Yep. Jalen McMillan, we like as a buy right now as well. Honestly, it might be tough to invest in Jalen McMillan at the moment. I totally admit that because some people might want to stick with them and ride out what's going to happen in Tampa this offseason. And the reason that's such an interesting situation to us is because Chris Godwin probably will not re-sign with the Bucs.
Everything is pointing towards him not re-signing. I don't think they would.
Yeah, I mean, they extended Mike Evans to basically hey, this is your last contract that you're going to get. You're going to ride this contract out until you retire, sort of guy or sort of thing. Because again, he's the Bucs franchise. He's the face of the freaking franchise.
Yeah.
Chris Godwin, they gave an extension to obviously a couple of years ago. Now that's up. And I don't think that they have. I don't know what the Bucs cap room is this offseason, but to me,
it's better than it was.
Better than it was
because they're getting off of some of the mortgages that they really had to do from their Super Bowl rosters
with their old guys on the defensive side of the ball.
So it's better, but again,
why would you reinvest in that and a 29 going on 30-year-old wide receiver who's coming off of an injury, who we love, by the way. We still love Chris Godwin. This is not against Chris Godwin. This is more. They were looking ahead when they drafted Jalen McMillan in the 3rd round last year, and we saw it coming because number one, we like Jalen McMillan. Wow. Number one, we liked McMillan as a prospect. Number two, his most consistent pro comp was Chris Godwin. Like, not just from us, from a ton of pro scouts that are way more trustworthy than us. Like pro scouts from the NFL. Pro comp, Chris Godwin. He ran a lot of routes out of the slot. He was able to have really nice big playability down the field, and you obviously saw that demonstrated and executed at the NFL level towards the end of the season last year. Honestly, I don't really care about the touchdown dependence. I mean, the reason he had such a good run in the last 5 weeks of the season is because in that 5-week stretch, the dude had 7 touchdowns. 7 of his 8 touchdowns came in the last 5 weeks of the season. I don't care when I'm playing the market in the offseason. We can reevaluate Jalen McMillan's price when Chris Godwin is officially away from the Bucs, officially signing with the Jags or someone. When Jalen McMillan is the next man up and he is officially the wide receiver 2 in that offense, coming off of a really, really nice performance the last quarter of the season, his value is going to spike. His value has already gone up significantly because of this run, but it'll go up even more once Godwin is certified out of that room. And at this point, both of us are pretty willing to bet that that's going to be the case, just because all signs have been pointing to that so far. Godwin had a phenomenal season last year. You might say that the Bucs are dumb for letting him go if they do. There's the issue with the cap, the issue with the money versus what you're going to get out of Chris Godwin coming off of an injury, even after he had his best season before he went down with the injury since his second year or whenever he had the wide receiver 2 season. McMillan was drafted literally for this, and I don't know how else to say it than that. And if you're faced with paying a 30-year-old wide receiver who's coming off of an injury, probably to a $20 million a year deal, 20 plus, or a third-round wide receiver that's on a rookie contract where his cap hit's going to be $1 million and you can get 80% of what you would get with Godwin at $25 million, it's worth it. I think it's worth it for them to just let him walk and invest in another position, because Baker was fine when they lost Godwin.
Honestly, he was fine. And McMillan turned it on at the end of the year there. Like, I mean, he looked, even just not from a statistical standpoint, he looked better too.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a no-brainer. Again, like Nathan said, it might be hard for you to get McMillan, but if you can, I think it's still worth
just
doing. Sitting there and he's literally just waiting to jump up in value a ton. Like
same story as Pearsall, but McMillan's actually produced and actually looks good.
McMillan is better than Pearsall, by the way.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a
is.
hot take or not, but I think he's quite a bit better. So, well, all right, let's talk about Patrick Mahomes. You'll remember earlier in the offseason, I was the one, Nathan as well, but I was kind of championing this. Like, I thought, hey, what is Patrick Mahomes actually, like, what advantage is he actually giving you? Well, and the quarterback market's going to change here, because look at Patrick Mahomes, and he's not doing near what he did a couple of years ago. And I'd rather have a rushing QB, and I moved him down my rankings, and it was pretty dramatic and whatever. Well, he currently sits at quarterback 6 in my rankings, the 8th overall player, which I thought, heck, that's being pretty aggressive, right? I moved him down. He's not a top 3 pick anymore. I'd take him at the end of the first and feel good about it. And what we've seen from the last really 3 Dynasty startups, real money startups, what we've seen is that Patrick Mahomes is actually going in the mid-second. And I'm seeing these teams start with Justin Jefferson, start with Jamar Chase, start with CeeDee Lamb as their first pick on their Dynasty team, and then pick up Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd round. I saw a dude trade out of the first and get Patrick Mahomes as his first pick in the 2nd round. Now, I totally understand still, again, because I remember I was the one that was like, hey, he was 11th in points per game from a quarterback perspective this last year. 18.4. It was exactly what he did in 2023, and it was nowhere near what he did in 2022, 25.1 points per game, which was obviously 2nd in the league. I understand that since Matt Nagy got there, he's really not been fantasy productive. Go figure. Count on him to ruin anybody's chances of being fantasy productive ever. But
Reed's just still calling all the plays.
There's that, but there was a correlation between when they hired Matt Nagy and when it was a lot less productive. Even this year, without in my opinion, without any decent running backs, Kareem Hunt was decent at times, but 3rd in pass attempts. He was 2nd in pressure throws. He obviously we saw in the Super Bowl. He was honestly pressured a lot, and he's just his pocket presence is so elite that I think a lot of times we don't notice just how under pressure he may have been this year. That the Chiefs do have a little bit of a need, I think, on the offensive line, even with as many good guys as they do have there. But 7th in passing yards. His analytics, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's still he's what, 29 and a half? He's still gonna play 10 more years probably.
There's a lot of value in safety. I think we've found that there's a lot of value in safety at the quarterback position right now, because you have such a large tier of productive quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And from a fantasy perspective, you've got your rushing guys, and then you have Burrow, and then you have a huge tier of like 10 to 12 guys.
You don't know what's gonna happen.
They could be anywhere. And I think when you're seeing guys like Lawrence who just plummet, Love who plummets, Dak who plummets, all these guys that you were like, oh, they're cornerstone guys, you're going to be able to count on them for years and years to come because of their contract insulation, they fall after one bad year. Because all of a sudden, you're like, oh, are they actually as safe as you think they might be? You're never going to have that question with Mahomes, ever.
I also don't think the fantasy upside is gone forever.
No, I don't think it is.
I think it's going to come back.
Yeah.
And so truthfully,
I'm not worried about it.
I'll take him in the 2nd round for the safety of it. I'll take him in the 2nd round because I know he's going to be my starting quarterback for the next 5 years in my dynasty. You've been playing 3-year windows. With Mahomes, you can play in a 5-year window. I know he's going to be on a team that's competing, so I know he's going to be productive. And I know his floor is 18.5 points per game. I know his floor is a low-end quarterback 1. So what's his median? Probably a mid quarterback 1. And what's his ceiling? Quarterback 1.
Yep.
And so in the 2nd round, I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut, and I'm seeing Patrick Mahomes at 16th, and like I said, he's being drafted anywhere from 16 to 20 right now. 3 words: sign me up. Sign me up for that. I will absolutely buy into Patrick Mahomes at this price. You see us, honestly, a lot of times what you see us do with Mahomes is recommend down tiers, and usually it's team dependent. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's because people drafted Patrick Mahomes in the 1st round, or 101 last year, and they don't have a ton of value. They lost out on a 1st round pick, essentially. He's now a 2nd round pick. You've lost a fair amount of value. But if you have a team where you can hold Mahomes, if you have a team where you could go buy Mahomes potentially for cheap, or somebody's just, tunnel vision and they're like, no Holmes isn't any good anymore, then I'll go buy him.
Yeah, I mean, you know what the worst productive game that he had this year was? 14 points. And yeah,
it just seemed a lot worse than it was.
He scored 14 points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the entire year. So those games, you're like, dude, 14 points, what the heck? It's better than a lot of quarterbacks dropping. I mean, Josh Allen was dropping single digits in a lot of weeks this year, and obviously that's not even a conversation who you prefer at this point in Dynasty and in fantasy. But the point stands that Patrick Mahomes is still, even in his worst year, incredibly consistent.
And he always, in my opinion, he will be until the day he retires.
Yes, agreed. Next guy that we're going to have here is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, this is kind of a price check on A.J. Brown. I think at this point, you guys kind of know how we feel about him. He's 27 years old. He is getting really, really close to where he's just going to be perpetually losing value. That was my whole argument for having him as a sell 2 months ago. The reason he's no longer a sell is because his price 2 months ago is not what his price is now, which is literally exactly what I anticipated, him losing value. I didn't think it would happen this quick. He's already a buy. In one of the startups that we had that we were breaking down in a live stream a couple weeks ago, he fell to the middle of the 4th round. I don't think you're going to see that in every single draft. I think you'll see him go 3-4 turn pretty consistently. That is a full round's difference compared to where he was going just 2 months ago.
And I want to put this in very clear terms, because Nathan was the one who said he was a sell. Nathan was right about him being a sell. And a lot of people are going to say, how would you have AJ? You just had AJ Brown as a sell. I mean, I want to make it as clear as we can.
Markets.
We were trying to play the market on this. It worked how it should have. We've overcorrected as the market. Because what we were saying is, hey, AJ Brown's value is here. We don't like his value, and we think it's going to go down. Sell before it goes down. Well, then it did go down. And so if you sold AJ Brown before that, you got out on him before he lost X amount of his value, so you saved yourself from a value loss, okay? Now, we're not saying if you sold A.J. Brown, now you can go buy him back. A lot of times you can't go buy him back, and that's okay, right? But for the teams who maybe haven't interacted with A.J. Brown on their roster, now's actually a decent time to invest, because if we were telling you to sell him here, and the point at which we would hold him is here, he's gone to here. Okay, and so that means he's gone well past the point where we said to hold him, and now he's gone so low, in some leagues especially, that he's a buy.
Yep.
And so that's how it works. Like, yes, people can be buys and sells in the same offseason if you're playing Dynasty from a day trading perspective. Dynasty is day trading. Players' values change every day, and their verdicts on players, and their values change every week. In Dynasty in the offseason, it's a little bit slower than every week, but it's been 7 weeks maybe since we posted that video. And like I said, since then, it's been pretty clear that A.J. Brown, the market has overcorrected now. We're too low on A.J. Brown, even though we did see a Super Bowl run. And we're comfortable, telling people, hey, you can trade for A.J. Brown just based on where his value has settled. And now he's not value adjacent to some of the guys we were talking about when he was a sell. He's value adjacent to a whole tier or two below that. And we would rather have him still over those guys 2 tiers below. So hopefully that makes sense, because again, this stuff does change. We don't want to come across like we're just, flip-flopping.
Right.
Which people will still say, hey, you guys are flip-flopping.
We're going to get that regardless. But again,
which
this
is
just...
But hopefully that makes sense. Like, it's the difference between somebody who plays Dynasty casually and somebody who really pays attention to values.
Well, it's the difference between takes and playing the market.
It's because it was not...
And playing value.
It's not, because we're not saying, hey, we didn't say, hey, sell A.J. Brown because A.J. Brown's bad or whatever, his career's in decline.
Right.
Like,
this is just anticipating market fluctuations.
And so we aren't right about everything, that's for sure. Like, but in this case, what we anticipated happening at least did happen to some extent. And
definitely happened faster
than
I thought.
It's good to play the market in these types of leagues. So hopefully that makes sense. I hope you made it to the end, because that's literally like how we've played Dynasty for 3 years. Is we just constantly like play the market, and we'll make trades. I'll trade away AJ Brown in one league 7 weeks ago. Now in other leagues where I can go get him for XYZ players, I'm going to do that.
Yep. And during the season, at the very end of the season, at the very end of 2024, we moved AJ Brown and we got Marvin Harrison Jr. in a second.
He's not worth that.
He was not even close to being worth that now.
So I'll throw the trade on the screen. It's just a practical example of on one of our Dynasty teams trading away AJ Brown when his price was this high, and now his price is 2 tiers below that, and he's being priced around guys, like I said, that now we prefer him over the guys that he's priced around now. And so hopefully that makes sense. Again, that's it's never about the player, it's always about the price. So make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe. Flockfantasy.com/domain to get yourself a free team blueprint, get the infinite blueprint, get the rookie draft guide, trade guide, everything you need for this offseason. Every single thing you need for this offseason, we have it all, and you get access to Nathan and I. You get that with the annual Motherflocker tier with code domain. Link is in the comments. We'd love to have you over there. We'd love to have you join the community. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here soon.